My fault that I'm out here getting loose. Gotta blame it on the goose. Gotta blame it on my juice, baby. Ain't my fault that I'm out here making news. I'm the put it in the proof. Gotta blame it on my.
So I want to take a few minutes just to introduce these two ladies. Our MARA Award winner is Jill Lewis. She is managing partner of Perkins Coie Dallas office, a member of the firm's corporate and securities practice, and co-chair of the infrastructure development practice. She focuses on advising companies with growth-oriented, liquidity-creating, and transformational strategies. She's also host of Relevant Now. Go look it up. I looked it up today, Jill, and there's some pretty powerful sessions in there that deal with a lot of our social issues as they intersect business and public interest. Also joining us is someone who is known to many of us, as she was an awardee last year, Dr. Arlene Ford. She's the founder of Equity Inquiry Project, where she consults with organizations including educational institutions, nonprofits, corporations, and their leaders to build capacity around equity, inclusion, and managing organizational change. She speaks nationally on issues of equity and inclusion and has taught a graduate level course on equity to education leaders at SMU in Dallas. I want to give you all plenty of time, so Arlene, I think you get to start kicking things off with questions, and I look forward to come back in a few minutes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dawn, and thank you all for coming. So appreciate your presence. What a wonderful occasion to celebrate Ms. Jill Lewis, my good friend. Before we start with the conversation, I wanted to just take a moment to recognize Thrivent. We have some Thrivent people in the room, yes? Can we see a shake a hand, shake a hip, something? Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for sponsoring this wonderful panel for this forum. Let me tell you a few things about Thrivent before we go on. It's a Fortune 500 diversified financial services company that offers holistic advice, investments, insurance, banking, and generosity programs to millions of clients nationwide. It was founded 120 years ago. Can you imagine that? And it was founded as a faith-based membership-owned organization. Thrivent is unique in its focus on generosity and service to the community. It strives to keep its clients, to help its clients to meet their financial goals and empowers lives of service and faith. It's an amazing company. They believe that money is a tool, not a goal. And their purpose is to help humanity thrive so that they can make the most of all that they've been given. Their promise is to help people achieve financial clarity, enabling lives full of meaning and gratitude. And one of the things that's amazing about Thrivent and that connects to what we're trying to do here is when they started out, I believe, when they were founded primarily as a Lutheran organization in the Midwest. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's correct, right? And in 2013, elevating the notion of representation, they expanded that to all Christians and expanded their services nationwide as well. So what that has done is they've brought in younger people, more diversified people all over, including women. And so Thrivent's work connects very well to what we're trying to talk about here today.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We'll have an opportunity to talk about that more. It's really an honor to be associated with something that really does have as its core trying to make the lives of humanity better. And the members of Thrivent are all people who really do use their money as a tool, their lives as a tool for making the world a better place. And so it's a very exciting place to be.
So thank you so much, guys. Thank you. So I want to kick off and start with our first question for you, my darling friend. The first question is, tell us a little bit about how you started out as a young lawyer, right? And then now you are managing partner. That's a big deal, by the way, if you guys don't know. Yes, that deserves a round of applause. Managing partner at the Dallas offices of Perkins Coie. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
So, you know, it's interesting, and I am at the point where I'm kind of looking back. So, first of all, I would love to give a wonderful shout out to a group of women who are truly women helping women, my colleagues at Perkins Coie. So, wave friends. They're spectacular people and a spectacular firm. The values are just so aligned with mine because it really is about elevating representation, and not in the legal sense of representation, but truly making sure that we can bring women, people of color, into commerce and have them truly participate, new inventions, all kinds of things, and that is just in the DNA of the firm. And so it's really a pleasure to have these people as my colleagues. They are tremendous, tremendous women and men. We have plenty of men, but tremendous, tremendous women at this firm, and it's an honor every day to work with them. So the journey is never linear. As I was growing up, I always enjoyed reading people's bios. I remember that Bryant Gumbel, if you're old enough to remember him on the Today Show, Bryant Gumbel was a Russian history major. He was not a journalism major, and yet his career was journalism. And then one day the Today Show did a whole thing. They went to Russia, and he was able to like speak Russian and talk about the history, and then his life came this whole full circle. But you know, prior to that, what were the vicissitudes? I was raised by a physician and an interesting and eclectic mother who was, in fact, a journalist, but she was also a scientist. She taught school and later women's studies. And my dad was pretty sure that if I had shown, you know, the right type of promise academically, which I did, there's absolutely no way to not do that in a middle-class black household. You either get the homework done or you're dead. There's no option. That he was going to raise a doctor. And so that's what I was supposed to be. But yet, I kept thinking, I really am more interested in writing and advocacy and research. And so kind of finding that, but not really understanding, you know, what that looked like, because at that juncture, there was no representation in my own family for that. And we had people who did a lot of different things, but absolutely no lawyers. And nobody was particularly, you know, excited about that as a path. And then I thought about, you know, when I chose my school, I went to Howard University for undergrad because I looked at what was the success of our family, and we had all attended HBCUs. So that representation, being able to step out of minority, gave me a comfort that I could move forward in my career and my life and my growth as a person. But I went to school and I majored in broadcast journalism because I thought that, you know, print was going to be dead. It was the advent of the cable era. I was only a little early in some ways, but, you know, we're so digital now. But I said, I need to do something digital, and I will go and I will do that, and this will be my path. And then I remember the Christine Craft lawsuit. And if anybody here is old enough to remember that, it was an age discrimination case. A woman who was a very storied anchor was fired, and she brought a claim saying that she was fired because the station had said she had aged. She should have done the horrible thing of aging on television. And she was probably 40, you guys. So this was not even that, and it, you know, very relevant today as we think about some of the things that have happened in the media. But I took that little kernel and I said, well, one of the things I'm sure of is that if I continue to live, I will age. What can I do that would be something that has transferable skills to what I felt my skill set was, but also would allow me to be more valuable as I age? And it was just kind of dumb analysis, if you will, on becoming a lawyer. But it was always important along the way and during that growth path to see other women who had done this. Cindy Ohlenforst is a wonderful, wonderful mentor and role model of mine because she had 3 daughters, a husband, and she was at the top of her game. And understanding that I could do something like that. And all of her children are now Dr. something, by the way. I mean, she raised some powerful women in her family, but I kept her family Christmas card on my desk to inspire me that I, too, could be a mother and a wife and be able to be at the top of my game. But it really is about seeing those things. And I know it sounds cliche, but it really does help to know that you can move forward in a space where a path has been blazed. But I will also say that at the time that I was coming up as a corporate lawyer, literally today, if you Google black M&A lawyer, my face comes up. That is because there are very, very few of us who do what I do in this financial thing. So I can't retire until people like my lovely colleague Ebony, who's also a corporate lawyer, are able to get launched and come up. And it's very important to me because that representation is huge. And I can remember being the only a lot. And I know that by being, just sort of standing, that it's important representation.
And I bet going to Howard was a good place for you to be in because so many of us, right? So many people of color striving to be something, to be whatever.
Generations. When you think about people in 1919 who were going to law school at that time, these were people who were not free for very long, and they were going to law school. So just the legacy of that. There are statistics actually at Howard. I had the opportunity to sit on their board for many years, and just the statistics at Howard on how many journalists, scientists, dentists, physicians, engineers that they put into the marketplace. 25% of all African American journalists came through Howard University.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I want to do a little bit of a turn in our conversation and ask you about something that your family launched recently. You launched the At Last program, which is an urban boarding experience for children who are in low-income communities. And I just wanted to tell me a little bit about what led you to this path and how does it relate to elevating representation?
So you marry well. My husband, Randy Bowman, here, who was the CEO of At Last. And our lovely daughter, Rachel Bowman, who's here today.
Rachel.
So Randy and I have always had service as something in the forefront of our lives. And he was watching the scene, if you will. It goes back, I remember exactly, we were on a trip. I was part of a political action committee called Educate Dallas here in Dallas that was trying to bring leadership to the DISD, and that was our way of impacting education. We said, well, let's get great leadership. And Randy's kind of watching me. He's like, yeah, that's interesting what you guys are doing. I have a different idea. I said, well, that's very interesting. And it was truly based on the life that he lived. He saw that what we were able to provide for our son and daughter who attended St. Mark's and Dallas Lutheran, that they were able to prosecute their educations more successfully, not because of the schools, although wonderful schools that they were sent to, but because of their home life circumstance and how that part of the day, the 71% of your day, can absolutely overwhelm anything that your teachers teaching at the highest levels can bring to you. And so really having someone like Randy, who was somewhat lightning in a bottle, to be able to be represented now in the creation of something that, as he will tell you, is not something he read about, but something he lived. And so the ability to do that, he and I started talking about it and shaping it, because at first he said, we'll just go in and we'll just tell people that their kids just need to be here. I was like, no one's taking anybody's kid. He's like, okay, you're probably right about that. And then he started to really hone what were the things that we brought to the house that we had, that then if children in poverty had that and could access those kinds of resources and tools, how might they perform? And so it was really based on a thesis of how might children in poverty perform if they actually had the resources and tools of more affluent people. And it was from there that we launched the tremendous labor of love. We've just gotten all of our kids out of the house, and now we've got 16 more. But really, being represented in the space of creation of solutions. So when you think about creation of solutions for women, that we've got to be at the table, for all of that.
That's just so amazing. I mean, I think using our experiences, right, to lift up our community, to give a hand is really amazing. Amazing work, you guys. I feel like we should give an applause for that because that's what each of us, right, is called to do. And so talking about community and talking about experiences, so you talked earlier about starting out in journalism school, right? And then now you have a podcast, I hear. Dawn spoke about that at the beginning. It brings both your journalism and advocacy skills together. Tell us a little bit about that, how you started it, and what you hope to bring to listeners.
Well, it's kind of funny because when I think about it, I think you can't escape what God wants you to do. And so this full circle for me of coming back to that expression, I think is about calling, very much so. So Relevant Now actually started as a chat group that I created because my thought was, there's a relevant point to what we talk about. And there's a different way of looking at solutions rather than the polarization that you see. Things like, bathrooms. That is a real estate question. No one actually wants to go pee in a group. Think about it. Don't you love the little stalls that are just so personally for you? But because of the real estate question of how do we more efficiently get enough spaces for people, so we're having the conversation about who should go where into what bathroom rather than the real estate question. And so when you think about like women's health, we are talking about very specific things, but we're not looking with the broader lens. And I thought about my work in the corporate space and how, and this is true for At Last as well, utilizing the same types of analysis that we use for any business problem should be brought to bear for societal good. And so similarly, At Last really looks at a repeatable, reportable approach that is very data-centric, even though it's sort of like the androids can give love. So it's really administered by people, and it's love with accountability, but it has a backbone in analysis and making sure that it's repeatable and reportable. And so when you take that kind of solution into it, looking at the issue of representation in the arts. This is another one of the podcasts. And one of my friends who went through HBS, did all the traditional marketing stuff, and then really got into art. And how are we represented, particularly African-American artists, and the ability to be an artist? Because that's the other thing. I mean, moms and dads, if your kid says, hey, I'd like to be an artist, you're like, wow, you're going to be on the payroll a long time. And that is something that if you don't see that representation of this can actually be something that people can prosecute successfully, let's not cover that light, let's encourage it. So he used his business head to say, what if I developed a fund? And that through that fund, plus pairing it with a nonprofit, I was able to buy works from artists that are emerging artists, but keep and allow them to monetize that, but then also be able to, as they move forward, be able to experience the added revenue of having a royalty on the sale that comes after it. And so in that way, they're able to prosecute their art. They don't have to sell too early. And he has a bunch of stats about, people who really break. And they may have sold their first piece for $500 and it later goes for $2 million. And you know what they got? They got $500. And so looking at that, but it took somebody with a business mind to say, let me figure out this financing gap for people.
I love how you're bringing in the notion of elevating representation and bringing on and lending a hand even into the art world, right? So we're talking about elevating representation, and you've already started to answer this question, but I want to ask you to dig a little deeper into it. Just tell us a little bit more about how you have centered making space for underrepresented people in your work. You're doing that in the art world, I've heard, but in other areas as well. And what can we do in the audience to support people, to help to elevate underrepresented folks?
So I think it takes some intentionality. In our hybrid world, that takes even more intentionality, because you can't just sort of send an email and get the same kinds of interactions. And I think that it is so incredibly important that we live in that way. I want to make sure that I give people the permission and the space to know that they can grow. I want to be the wind under people's wings as they move forward. I think about Chastity is in the audience today, and one of the things that I loved so much that she and a group of young lawyers did, she's not quite so young anymore though, she's matured, she's gone up in her career, but a group of women who were very junior at the time said, we're all having the same issues. And it was that lack of representation, that lack of mentoring, and they said, well, why don't we pull together? Why don't we create our own table rather than being so worried about if we're invited to the table? To have that empowerment for oneself. And what happened is their table was so amazing, the new round table, that now others wanted to pull up to that and experience it, and it has elevated them so wonderfully. So it's so important really for each of us in the spaces that we are to look around and say, how can I be a part of bringing people forward? I think that's exactly what makes this a better world and is so incredibly important.
Which is amazing, and congratulations, Chastity. So tell me a little bit about, so I know as a woman of color, sometimes there's an added piece to it, right? There are some really big positives, like you can create your own table, and the table expands, right, because there's so many of us. And then there are also, so there's some positives, but there are also some challenges. Can you just tell us a little bit about how your journey has been impacted by being a woman of color? How some of the choices that you've been making or you've made have been impacted?
Sometimes you peel back the onion of your life much, much later, and you don't realize what's happening. When I was in high school, a man called me, and he said on landline, so you get people's phone numbers this way, and he called and he said, I'm from Harvard University, and I would really like to talk with you. I've talked with your guidance counselor, we've gotten your numbers, and we'd really like to talk to you. The representation that I remember in Boston was around the riots that happened when they were desegregating the schools, and I just had this vivid picture of people rocking buses. And I'm not 100 years old, you all. This is something that happened in my lifetime, and looking at that was me making a decision that, no, that's not a place that I would want to go right now. Luckily, that kept me from making a huge mistake and I went to Howard, which was a fabulous opportunity. But later I did go on to Harvard for law school, as did you. And so you've had a lot of the same experiences. But that representation, I think, is people censor themselves. Women in science censor themselves. We have seen that if you do not see yourself and the ability of those people to make it, and it's not a perfect journey. This is not something where it's just like, I've just kicked butt my whole life and never had my butt kicked. No, this is something where you have to get back up, dust off your knees, shake off a little embarrassment, and keep going. And so that's the other thing. I remember I was talking with my daughter, she may or may not remember this, in high school, and I said, I don't think I ever told her that I didn't always get, the things that I wanted or felt the most popular or secure in myself, because all she sees is this grown-up mother person who seems to be taking quite charge. And I thought it was so important to just reveal that vulnerability that we all have and that we don't come out fully formed. And we need to give ourselves some grace and dig into our resilience to move forward.
I think one of the things you learn as a woman of color, you sort of alluded to, is the fact that you've got to get really comfortable with discomfort. You've got to get really comfortable with failing and picking yourself back up. So thank you for that. Tell me something. So can you tell me a little bit about how you've created space for women to advance in leadership, for others, and especially women to advance in leadership?
Again, I think it's about the intentionality. I surf the platform in my law firm and try to make sure that I'm connecting with women and giving them the ability to take the elevator instead of the stairs on their own learning curves. And I think some of it may be, being a big sister, you sort of have had to go out there and forge a way where there were none. When I was coming up in law firms, there really were no me's. And so now that I am there, it's so important to me that that is beneficial, because we all have seen the situation where just representation, just the physical manifestation of whatever, did not actually improve the lot of those who look like that person, be they female, people of color. It's important to use your space, like Esther in the temple. It is very important to use that opportunity when you are in these spaces, because if not, we're not here to just clap at one person's parade who's made it. We really are here to bring everyone forward.
Amen. Amen. Thank you. So tell me, what are some of the things that helped you to advance, to become a leader? Because we know it has not been, as you said, easy, always, right? So what are some of the things that helped you to advance in leadership?
An awesome cadre of sister friends is very, very important. I see Deborah Hunter Johnson sitting there in the back, and I remember that I was going through something in a management position that I had, and it was really challenging. And I went to her, and she is an absolute organizational ninja. And I went to her and I studied like Luke Skywalker under Yoda. And it was so incredibly helpful, because she also gave me the validation that I was worthy of succeeding, and that the way that I was processing the information and the experiences were entirely valid. I married an amazing partner. And he is so incredibly supportive. And he may or may, and I'm going to have to kind of censor it a little bit, but I remember when I was a junior associate, and it was just, a struggle day. We all have had them. And it was just a struggle day. And he said, well, baby, they can't follow you home and kick your butt, so you'll be okay. And sometimes it's just the little things, the levity and the you can make it and we can go forward. And there are limits to the power that others have over you, that you really do define yourself and your power.
Is so true, right? There's a limit, right? We get to walk in our power, and then we get to walk with our sisters as well, and brothers, and especially with our sisters. I love that. So what advice do you have for the next generation of young women who are coming up, who want to pursue their dreams as leaders in their respective fields? What advice do you give them?
I want to think about that a little bit. The first thing is be good to yourself. I find that we somehow believe that all of this just has to hurt so incredibly much. But preserve yourself and respect yourself and love yourself. And whether that's a cup of tea or just going ahead and doing the valet, whatever you need that day. Sometimes you just have to do that. I do find that things like meditation, because there are some really powerful principles of where you put your mind, and that is tremendous. That is the thing that you're going to need most in life to carry you forward, is your mental health and your sound mind. Guard that fiercely. And then really do work hard at your craft, not for what you think others will think of you, but what you think you want to give. What kind of professional do you want to be? I think that we are living in a world, particularly for women, we can have whatever we finally decide we want to have. I really want that to wash over everyone. That some of the things that we look at and we say, oh, the plight of women, X, Y, and Z, just name your statistic. Some of it, and I'm not going to say is a choice, because there have definitely been laws and forces and circumstances. So I do not belittle people's standing and what has happened with them. But some of it, we actually can rise up and change. I often think about that with women in leadership and women in politics. When we decide that we are ready to vote for women, they actually get in office. We are the majority of people who do that voting. And when women come to the table, I love I always say, let's make government co-ed. When women and men come together on solutions, you're going to get a better solution than if one group is only speaking. And I think that is just tremendously important.
Thank you for that. Women, did you hear that? I hope you did.
Well, yeah.
I hope you did.
And it is a true thing that the woman who is our current vice president, it's because women got together and said she will be that.
Amen. Amen. Do you have any other advice for the rest of the audience? I know I asked you about the next generation, but what about anyone else who wants to become a leader or who wants to support a leader?
So, and those are, I think, crucial things. I have a son, he's up in New Jersey right now. One day maybe we'll get to pull him back. But he was a tailback. That's a running back. The guy gets the ball for people who don't. I'm a football mom, so I can call plays now. And when he got the ball, he was very fast and pretty strong, but he was not going to get in the end zone unless he had downfield blocking, which means you can't just go watch somebody else try to get there. You've got to get in and try to help them make it over. And so that is so important. Be somebody's downfield blocking and make that happen. We don't do it alone. No one does it alone. When I said to my team, I sure hope you can make it, because there's no greater group of women helping women than you would imagine. And so I do think that it is so important to put yourself in that space of how you can both support leaders and understand your definition of what is a leader. I really do subscribe to the servant leadership mindset. Officers eat last, and we are the ones, leaders are the ones who are enabling others to come forward. Leaders are not people who lord over people. And so you should derive your happiness and success and fulfillment from those you are able to bring up. And when you can look back and see tons of people who, but for you being there, and sometimes you don't even know. I remember a summer clerk once told me that just seeing me made her feel like she belonged. And I was like, well, I could almost retire now if I've done that. But sometimes your kindnesses, your willingness to stop, have a cup of coffee, your willingness to help, you never know how you're going to touch someone. And that is That is an important thing on the definition of leadership and what you think you're really striving for at the time.
Servant leader. Another hand clap for that, please. You never know how you're bringing someone along. I love that. All right, so listen, we come to the final question. It's gone by very quickly. The last question I have for you is, tell us what it means to you to be a recipient of the Mara Women's Helping Women Award. Women Helping Women Award.
Servant of God, well done. It is so important to me that any recognition that I receive is about the ability to help others, and I am not a public crier. when Alicia sees this, she'll be like, and you told me never to cry, and look at you. But it is so deep in my spirit that that's what I have really wanted to achieve in my life, is helping others. And maybe that's part of why I became a lawyer too, loudmouth, advocate. I will jump in, I will go to other people's parent-teacher conferences and help their kid, literally. They're like, do you have defense counsel here? But to be recognized for helping others, I think is just the highest form of living. So that is what it means to me.
Congratulations again, you are so deserving. And what an honor for me to be here to celebrate with you, to get to chat with you, to get to have this conversation. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
I have to tell you my nickname for her.
Uh-oh.
It's the Impress. You know how women may walk and, guys will like yell out because you're cute or whatever. We were in Jamaica, yes, when this happened? Yeah. She was in Jamaica and a gentleman says, Impress. And she's like, that's not bad. And so now when I greet her, Impress. Thank you so much. And thank you, Women's Foundation, for all the work that you do to celebrate and to empower women.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Dr. Ford. This was a fantastic conversation, and I so much appreciate you reminding us the importance of friendships, and I heard that in the last one. We are about helping others, whether it's personal or professional, and giving everybody a hand up. So thank you for that. We have a few minutes for questions, so I will come around with the mic. Look, we start right here in the front row.
Do I have to stand up?
You should do whatever makes you feel comfortable.
I'll stand up. I've been sitting in the car for too long. So hi, I'm Adriana. I'm a student at Texas Women's University, and more importantly, I'm a gender studies minor. And so I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term intersectionality.
Absolutely.
Yes. My gender studies professor had a fun time with me. I've heard the term over and over again, intersectionality, and then bringing your full self to work. What are specific things that you've implemented, or have you told others to actually implement that, bringing your whole self to work with all of your intersectionality identities, being a woman, being a person of color, being of the LGBTQ community, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But what are specific things to actually do that, to bring your full self to work?
So thank you so much for that question, first of all, because intersectionality is so incredibly important to think through. I remember in going to Howard, and there I was, and I had stepped out of minority. It's a majority African-American school. We've got actually everybody and everything from 103 countries, but it is truly majority African-American. And it wasn't until later that I realized that the empowerment that I felt had not been shared by my friends in the LGBTQ community at all. And that has evolved, luckily, over the years, and we now have that representation. We have those organizations and clubs. And so that elevating that intersectionality, or you're so busy being a woman, it's hard to be black, or you're so busy being black, it's hard to be a woman. And do you get to be all of those things? So intersectionality of representation and just understanding that it exists is a key component. So that's where I would begin. In terms of specific things, I would say that sometimes there's tone at the top. What do you support? And making sure that you as an ally know how to jump into those spaces, leveraging your own capital and influence to help others see that that can happen. Making sure that you're walking the walk as well, that you're bringing your full self enough that others can feel like, wait, there's an opening for me. And inviting people to bring that forth in the workplace. And it's a delicate thing too, because no one wants to be like professionally one thing, right? You know, and like, so, well, you're a black woman, so hey, go head up diversity. It's like I embody diversity. But how about making sure that there's a space where everybody can really participate, and that we bring those cultural competencies forward. I think our firm does a nice job of it with a lot of our diversity programming, in that we hit everything and everybody, and we don't just like celebrate Martin Luther King, and we also know that that's not the only famous black person that's ever done anything, and similarly in lots of different arenas. So it really is about the leader. But it starts with making space for that representation and understanding concepts like intersectionality.
Great question. Hi, my name is Rhoda Barkett. I'm an executive at the Boeing Company in quality, and I'm just so excited I came to your session today. I just loved all of your answers, but also the variety of passions that you have and how you've been able to really make significant achievement in your career. And my question is, I've got a deep, deep passion for making a difference in the world. And as I'm in corporate America, I always think about, am I on the right path? In addition to that, I think when you have family and you think about, how do I achieve a lot of various things that maybe are important to you, how did you think through what to prioritize today, what to put off, and what sort of thinking process did you go through as you came through your journey?
And we can talk about this more offline, depending on how deep you want to get into that. But work-life balance is a 100% myth. And you will only be angry and disappointed if you think that's a thing. Work-life juggle is how it goes. So sometimes it's going to be a little more family and a little less work. Sometimes it's going to be a little more work and a little less family. And you have to have an amazingly supportive spouse. And what I found is that even your children are part of that juggle. They're like, yeah, don't you go to work now? Okay, great. I remember we were talking about having summers off. And my son was 10 years old. I was headed to take him to a YMCA camp and, driving him in. And I said, wow, we don't get summers off. And he said, well, we can't all have summers off. The world will just implode. He was like 10 years old. He was like sort of respecting the fact that we're all doing these different things and juggling. Another thing is I went through one of those, like, am I really helping people, or am I just, making the world safe for capitalism? Nothing is wrong with that, but what am I doing that really gives to people? And one of my colleagues said, never underestimate the power and benefit of giving somebody a job and purpose, and having it be a place where they come to that is comfortable and not toxic and not deleterious to their mental health. I think those things are important. And then there's always the side hustle. And your side hustle can be your service. So I flew in an overnight trip from, I see some of my Argentina buddies here, from Argentina. And I wanted to kick my own behind, because after I went through that, 10-hour flight, and then I land at 8:30, and then I need to go into work. I also had a service project for the Links Incorporated, because we're recognizing today, in fact, our Women Who STEAM. And I was in charge of putting together the gift boxes for our honorees for Women Who STEAM. And I was very, very tired and very, very stressed, and I had a lot of clients that needed some things. But by God, these Women Who STEAM were going to be honored. And the only way you don't do that is you have to be actually in the hospital. But I make space for service, and you try to be part of organizations that help you with that. and have even your company, choosing your company by, do they align with your values? I mentioned that with respect to Perkins. It aligns with my values because we are all about philanthropy, service, in addition to what we do. We have a foundation. I was like, this is an awesome firm. We have a foundation. Even we actually give away money to people. This is fantastic. But try to find things that mesh with your values. And just because you're going to work every day and you need to do that, and by the way, thank you for being at Boeing. We incorporated them like 112 years ago, so there's a big connection there. But make space for things that make your heart sing, and everything else in your life will go so much better. There's a reason that I could do that horrible death march of a day. It's because everything I was doing I loved so much and valued so much.